Hi everybody, I've just managed to master the go live button, which isn't as easy as you'd think for someone of my limited ability. So we're on our task, aren't we, of getting viewers down to zero.
We are on zero right now. We have zero viewers, so we're actually talking to ourselves right now.
Which is, we need to fall out, and then
Yeah.
I want to rant like King Lear on the heath about
scandal.
about biscuits and Adette, she's a bad un, and just rage against the universe. And I reckon that'd get quite a few.
I think that should. Yeah, we need some sort of was it clickbait thumbnail of you just going, me just going no.
Right, so we got up to the bit. We're still on Swann in Love at the beginning, and I was going to say today, I don't think we're going to make much progress in terms of pages, because I think it's a deceptively, but even more than usual, I think it's a deceptively complex bit, this, where they're in Madame, I always forget her name, Verdurin, Madame Verdurin's salon. And they start talking about art. And I don't know about you, Stuart, but I found Madame Verdurin interesting. It's like Proust in microcosm, because she's shallow. She's basically like a pre-wag, wives and girlfriends of the footballers. She's shallow. And yet there's one particular point where she tells him to feel the furniture, which again is Proustian, because it's funny. But it's also... she does have an artistic sensibility when she's not dislocating her jaw from laughing too much. She's actually got quite a sophisticated artistic sensibility, but then she does everything to drown it in superficiality and social cattiness. And in this section, when they start going on about the sonata, I think there's some quite profound statements about the nature of art. What is the point of art? How do we have epiphanic moments in art? And what I like about it is, because if you read Schopenhauer about aesthetics, and maybe later I'll talk about James Joyce, A Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, is it a portrait of the artist, or it's the artist, isn't it? I always say I'm an artist.
I'll check. No, I'm not too sure, Paul. I wouldn't like to speculate.
Well, I should, I've read it enough times. I should know the bloody title, but A Portrait of an Artist...
portrait of the
artist. It makes more sense. It's more difficult to say an artist, but anyway. Stephen Dedalus in that, and it's a portrait of the artist as a young man is a gateway drug for Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake. It's relatively accessible. The most accessible is the Dubliners. Then there's a portrait of the artist. And then there's the really difficult ones. But I think there are various scholars who've looked at Proust and Joyce together. And one of the things they've looked at is the notion of, what do they call it? Incarnation, transubstantiation. So it's interesting. I think that Proust was definitely affected by Catholicism. So I think his mother was Jewish. He was brought up surrounded by Catholicism, even though he had ambiguous religious beliefs. And Joyce was obviously, in some ways, quite anti-religion, but at the same time, he was born and bred in Ireland that was drenched in Catholicism. And so just for example, at the very beginning of Ulysses, there's a fake mass. One of the characters, Buck Mulligan, makes fun of the sacrament of mass. And all the way through, I've seen various scholars analyze Proust is interested in the contrast between spirituality and abstract things and the material. So it gets very earthy, as we've discussed before, when he goes to the brothel and when he's dealing with the debt, who's it's already been stated, she's a part of the demimonde. So she's basically a prostitute, she's a courtesan, high-class call girl. So you couldn't say within Remembrance of Things Past, and then there's the bloody biscuit thing, which is almost like the sacramental wafer, the role it plays in Proust.
Yeah.
So he's not obsessed, but he's very, very conscious of the physical. But then all the way through the book is a matching desire to lose oneself in art or to find himself as a writer. And a writer is trying to capture the world through words. And the beginning of the Gospel of St. John is, in the beginning was the Word. And I'm working on, I'm not, we'll talk about it later, but I'm not going to watch the Odyssey. I'm on strike. You and James are. But yeah. I was actually working. I can't use the title, but I was going to say in the beginning was the Word. And then Christopher Nolan shot it. Because I see the latest Odyssey film as the official death of the written word.
Yeah.
As all these nerdy people like you who love their IMAX cameras, start arguing about who saw the best screen. The IMAX screen in Madrid's better than yours.
There isn't one here. That's the problem. I'm going to have to see it in a pokey little tiny screen, not the way Nolan envisioned it, which is a bit of a pain.
That's your punishment. But anyway, would you want to jump in and tell me whether you think that this section, so they're in the salon, he's just met Odette, he's being set up by Madame Verdurin, who wants him and Odette to get together, and there's the physical, the carnal, and there's this almost like this transference, isn't there? There's nothing much in Odette compared to his usual taste in women, but he transfers his love of the musical sonata and transfers it onto Odette, which then I think last time we talked about the way in which a lot of our mental love lives is a complete projection and fantasy. So we finished, didn't we, where it says she had struck Swann not certainly as being devoid of beauty, but as endowed with a style of beauty that left him indifferent, that aroused in him no desire. So Proust is being quite clear that gave him indeed a sort of physical repulsion. So he's being pretty clear, isn't he, that there is nothing naturally, instinctively attractive about Odette to Swann, which raises the stakes for thinking it's complete transfer, not complete, but it's a majorly transference about his feelings to the music.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can't remember if it happens before this point now, the sonata, or whether it's after the sonata. Maybe we were jumping around a little bit last session, but he visualizes her as one of the like frescoes from the Sistine Chapel, doesn't he? The Zippora. I've actually got that. I'm going to put that on for a second. So this is what he envisions her, and he gets a copy of this picture, doesn't he? And he kind of has it on his desk, or he carries it around with him. But he does say that this is an image that develops, and I do wonder whether the sonata is the kind of the subconscious memory cue, and this is another. I think, did they call it like a totem? It's like a representation of something. He's got this visual representation of her that was obviously she probably doesn't look like this, but he's painted her immaterially onto something physical. So it's not just he has a fantasy of her in his mind, he has to have a physical representation, a material representation to back that fantasy up in his head. But the sonata is a little bit different, because the sonata is more kind of a transference of transcendental experience, probably unrelated to her, but because it happened in proximity to her, he associates that feeling of transcendence with her at the same time. So I think there's two things going on: the visual, but also this almost like kind of sublime aspect that I think Proust is getting at as well.
Get the point about that's Catholicism, because in the transubstantiation, the Holy Spirit goes to work, and the blood and the bread and wine becomes the blood and flesh of Christ, and it's this epiphanic, this imaginary, abstract, wonderful feeling he has gets transposed into Odette. So it sounds a bit of a reach, but theologically, this notion of incarnation, this is the whole point of the Christ story. It's suffused in various art forms, much more than you might think. It's definitely in Joyce, it's definitely in Proust. And that's what just reminded me. You've also triggered me slightly, because that picture of Zippora, I went round for months when the Sydney Sweeney jeans advert came out, and I laminated a picture. Yeah, I laminated a picture of one of their adverts and carried it around in my back pocket. It's a bit more prosaic, but not much.
Does she look a bit Sydney Sweeney-esque? She's got the locks, doesn't she? Yeah.
I used to have a thing. This is just Paul now oversharing. I used to have a thing for Katie Mellower.
Katie Mellower, that rings a bell. I can't.
She's the singer, 1 billion bicycles in Beijing or something.
Oh, I remember her now.
We should just do women Paul and Stewart fancy.
Celebrity crush.
Every 2 weeks, we'll just put up pictures of great art, and then we'll lower the tone.
yeah. I'm trying to think that. Yeah.
Oh, Katie Mello was lovely.
I'll have to. Yeah, I do have her in my back of my head, but I just can't remember. I had a poster of Britney Spears. I was boring. I had Britney Spears on my wall when I was a
really.
Teenage, I don't know why.
Britney Spears is the Adele of, famous women. I'm sorry, I'm not having that. Yeah, and then it starts later. Just about a paragraph further on, he talks about, but at the age already somewhat disenchanted that Swann was approaching. I think I've gone beyond that. I'm in the backstretch of post-disenchantment, floating on my back into oblivion. When a man can content himself with being in love for the pleasure of loving without demanding too much in return, this linking of hearts. So it's almost like the evolution of the romantic tendency in a man. If it is no longer as in early youth, so there's a progression, which again implies that the concept of being in love, so to speak, isn't a objectifiable, obviously, but it's not a capturable, it's not a steady, it's not a consistent notion. It actually evolves over time, and it's sometimes more to do with your age than your shoe size. Isn't that a lyric from a song?
Yeah, it's. I was just telling you the other day I've been getting into this Ian McGilchrist. I've been reading a lot of his stuff lately. I just find it fantastic. He's the left brain, right brain guy, and he does say. I remember reading one thing that he said that love is one of these emotions that the left brain, that the calculative brain can't capture, because it's kind of beyond capture. It's more complex. It's not something that can be kind of defined as like a mechanical function or a feature or a process. It's so messy and it's so different for everyone. And like you say, it changes over time. And I was also reading, this goes back to a couple of sessions before when we were talking about there's the Gaumont way. What's the other way called again? The
Meglise.
The Meglise way, which is the one that has all the rivers. It's the Gaumont way has the rivers. So the Meglise way is like raw nature, and I think the Gaumont way is by the side of the rivers. And Proust talks about rivers as like the flow of life. I can't remember what it was, but there was this image of like a whirlpool. A whirlpool is kind of like a captured point in life. It's still a process that's moving. And I was reading Friedrich Schelling, and there's a couple of his essays, and then he's writes Nature Philosophy. He talks about, in a process philosophy kind of way, this idea of like a whirlpool. And I think it's very fitting for love, because if you think going back to Greek mythology, the whirlpool, the maelstrom, is this kind of, very kind of intense, something that sucks you in. You don't quite see the center, a bit like a black hole in modern science. And it is very much, I think, a good analogy for love as well. It's this kind of maelstrom of feelings, emotions, things that we can't capture. But there's things that occur in love that we cannot capture in science. A bit like consciousness, we can't name what's going on. We only have an approximation, whereas art is in a much better position, which Ian McGilchrist says this art is like, art poetry is a right brain kind of thing. And it's much better captured in art, writing, poetry, etc. And I just think this whole section of Swann, falling in love, or I would say it's more infatuation than love. It's a bit of a kind of a dangerous love. I wouldn't say it's necessarily reciprocated, but all the emotions come into play, like a raging water, like a white water, or rapids, or a whirlpool. All these different emotions swirling around together all at the same time, and it's just brilliantly captured.
Yeah, and just linguistically in English, I'd be interested in various. I'm trying to think because in English it's falling in love. But in other languages, do they have this sense of losing control?
Yeah.
So what is it in Spanish? Isn't it cadere is in one language? I'm trying to springs to mind.
Well, in Spanish, you don't say I love you. You say te quiero, like I want you. I need to possess you. I need to have you, kind of thing.
It's also, I was reading the other day, it's like the difference in German is that pleases me, whereas in English you'd say I like it. So this idea about Germanic people being more logical and objective and a bit cold, it's because the world pleases them. not the other way around. But it's
very passive. The pleasure comes to you.
Yeah, but we're joking about it. But this is the concept of, again, back to McGilchrist, but cognitive linguistics and the whole idea that Heidegger before McGilchrist would say language is the house of being. That the way in which we're able to think and feel is structured by the language that's already in us.
Yeah, well, I'm amazed to see just how influenced McGilchrist was by Heidegger, and he's full of Heidegger, he's full of Wittgenstein. He's really read his stuff. I'm really impressed with the guy.
Well, we had a little chat on, didn't we, offline, and I mentioned Louis Sass, who I think is a brilliant writer, and you fibbed to me because he doesn't do a whole chapter on him. I rechecked. He does a good section of a chapter, and Louis Sass, backing up what you were saying about dealing with love through art. Louis Sass talks about he wrote a book called Modernism and Madness. And he was I can't never remember whether he was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, Louis Sass. But McGilchrist really admires him. And he talks about the way in which modernism captures. So he uses the specific example I've used on the channel, Giorgio de Chirico, this really ambiguous atmospheric painter. And he calls it the Stimmung in German, which I think means mood or atmosphere. It's one of these idiomatic words. But he makes the point that de Chirico captures this melancholic atmosphere in all of his paintings. And schizophrenic people tend to have this dissociative experience. They don't relate to reality temporarily. They have these breakdowns, and the world becomes overwhelmingly real. And that's what Louis Sass writes about. And in a way, modernist literature, of which you could arguably class this novel, is because it's vaguely stream of consciousness. It's not your typical novel. And in instances like this, it's not as extreme as a schizophrenic having a dissociative experience. But with a lot of these mental conditions, it's on a spectrum. And the whole cliche about when you're in love, it's temporarily a form of insanity. I think Proust really captures that. So that the Stimmung of falling in love, this weird atmosphere that's a combination of the mental processes that he's describing in this section, but also, I suppose, it's biological. It's just the flood of endorphins, isn't it?
Well, I think McGilchrist would say it's both at once. We use the model of the biological in one sense, which is in Heidegger's terms will be correct but not true. It doesn't capture the whole thing. We can use the poetic, which again is another way of framing the raw phenomenon. And I mean, it goes back to Baudrillard, that video you did recently on Baudrillard and Blood Meridian. I mean, it goes back to simulacra and simulation. Like, we only experience things through simulation. We can't actually get through to some sort of actual concrete foundational reality. So the fact that there's so many frameworks and the concept of love and romance is so important to people, to humans, is something worth looking at.
And then he says, again, it's all about the evolution of love over time. So he says, in his younger days, a man dreams of possessing the heart of the woman whom he loves. Later, the feeling that he possesses the heart of a woman may be enough to make him fall in love with her. And that is if you want to, want reasons to read Proust, it's one, and for Proust, it's an incredibly short sentence. In one sentence, I think there's an awful lot of psychological truth there.
Yeah.
So it's the process of falling in love actually becomes an object of attention itself. So I might have mentioned, I don't know whether I mentioned a previous live stream we did, right? I knew a Greek guy I think he'd had 4 or 5, he was relatively young, and he'd had 4 or 5 fiancées. And he went through this constant process of proposing, being in a relationship, and then it ending. And never with any awareness that... I also read somewhere, there's one of these funny Twitter programs where someone... a father had tweeted, "I've walked you down the aisle 5 times for all your various marriages. I keep giving you away and they keep giving you back."
It's so true. It's so true. Well, there's a recognized phenomenon of people becoming addicted to the process of falling in love, not necessarily being in love.
Shall I sing Robert Palmer in the background?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll put my black dress on.
In the club style, of course.
Addicted to love.
You're not home. But there's that bit when Swann goes to Odette's window and he knocks on the window, and I'm just thinking of that song in the background. Your lights are on, but you're not home. And then two old guys. It's incited. There's two homosexual guys open the door. Oh, great fun. But no, I mean, I think we forget that the whole concept of love, it doesn't exist externally, objectively. It's a linguistic device or a linguistic placeholder, I like to use that to talk about a specific phenomenon that can be approached from different perspectives. But like everything, it doesn't stay the same. It doesn't last. And I think this is one of the things. It's like we have this idea in Western culture, especially, as love is some eternal thing. You find the one, you find the perfect person, you settle down, everything's the same. But as you said before, Paul, in Hollywood, we don't see the morning after. We don't see the morning after the deed is committed, when he wakes up and there's something annoying about one of the partners. Goes to the toilet and starts cleaning his teeth and gurgling the mouthwash, and he's like, ooh, I'm not so sure about this. We don't see that part typically in Hollywood. We don't see that part in romance novels, the nitty gritty. But here in Proust, we don't just see it in all its grotty glory. We see the process really from start to finish. And I think, for such an old book, I think it's still quite unique.
Yeah, and just that there are many drawbacks to the sheer scale of it, and it puts so many people off reading it. But what you've just described can only not even truly be represented, but you're going to get a much better sense of the process and the longevity and the way in which love erodes your I don't know, overshare, but the way in which love erodes your self-respect and turns you into a husk of your former self. And quickly moving on, he actually then says...
No, Paul, this is what people come to see. This is what our viewers want. Please overshare. The videos where you overshare get more views, so please... The floor is yours.
I would put back to people who tune in to see me self-destruct that if I am your clickbait, your life has gone wrong somewhere. I think we could all agree on that.
What's the rule of the internet, when these so-called meme rules of the internet? The whatever's on the internet, or whatever exists in fetish, there's something on the internet for it, or something like that.
Yeah. Right, well, quickly moving on, and he goes on to develop it. Love may come into being, love of the most physical kind, without any foundation and desire. At this time of life, a man has already been wounded more than once by love. It no longer evolves by itself, obeying its own mysterious and fatal laws before his passive and astonished heart. We come to its aid, we falsify it by memory, by suggestion. Recognizing one of its symptoms, we recall and recreate the rest. Which is what I was saying about people just getting engaged endless times.
Yeah.
They just want to recreate a certain process. It also partially explains I'm sorry for the cliche, but someone said in the comments, I can refute everything Dr. Paul says with respect. You need to clarify, are you refuting that I am a diminished husk of a man? Or it's very unclear what Gypsy Rose sex.
Yeah, please clarify.
Yeah. I think you need to clarify for all our sanities.
Yeah.
But this notion of the going through the process again and again, it also the cliche of, and I'm sure it works in the opposite direction. But the cliche of the bad boy, women like the dangerous bad boy, and why are you attracted to someone who is giving off all the signs? Don't come near me, I'll be trouble. That in itself feeds us like the frisson of a self-destructive urge people have. And again, I think what Proust isn't talking specifically about that, although when we get to Baron Charlot later on.
Yeah, I think it's there.
Yeah, but at this point, it's just about, I just think it's like, and this is, again, I think we've talked about the way Proust does things. He takes a subject matter, in this case, love, and it's like a multifaceted gem. He just turns around, doesn't he? And it reflects the light in various ways. And he's looking at a certain facet, in this instance, in the salon. But later on, you'll see the seamy side with Baron Charlot.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I'm just being distracted by Gypsy Rose's. She's saying self-denial. We have an amateur psychoanalyst, or maybe a professional, and I'm saving myself some money.
Could be a professional. Yeah, maybe someone sent you a gift by paying for an analyst to come into the live chat. Maybe it's Darren F. McGee.
It is. It's a plant. I think Gypsy Rose is actually Darren. So yeah.
Darren,
right.
you've been outed. Yeah. Anyway, but no, just going back to that point about self-destruction. I think in this romance with Odette, the self-destruction is evident. I think through the jealousy. I think it's the emotional jealousy Proust is focusing on, because there's certain bits we might not get onto it today, but if we do get onto it, there's certain bits where Proust is analyzing Swann's feelings, and he knows the jealousy is no good, and it's almost like he takes pleasure in the jealousy when he's at the window thinking that she's seeing another suitor. He takes some sort of pleasure in, I think the words Proust uses, truth. He wants the truth, but you get this almost like an internal monologue in Swann's head. He's convincing himself that he shouldn't see if she's with another man, but then he wants to, but then he doesn't want to, and it says, you know, it's eating him up, but he just wants to go through it. So it's that negative emotion of jealousy in itself is part of the passion of love.
And also, if you think of it, he's the perfect foil for this, because I don't know if we've got past it or it's about to come, but it mentions, I think we're about to see it. It's described how he's so at ease in social gatherings.
Yeah.
Because he's friends with the Prince of Wales and he has nothing to prove to anyone. So he's incredibly easy, and most people would be the opposite. Most people could be vaguely competent in everyday love affairs, but actually aren't particularly socially gifted. He's got this unusual ease with people, and he can go through all the different social classes, and they even make fun of that. Marcel's father says, "Oh, here's trouble. He's asking us for, you know, to introduce to another family, so we can get off with the cook or whatever." But he's so much in control of his own social status. He's so at ease. So when he's thrown for a loop, that's interesting, because he then suddenly can't control anything. So I think it exaggerates the loss of control.
He might like that, though. That might be the fetish here. That he's in so much control of these previous relationships with, like you say, cooks, you know, like handmaids, like the servant of a handmaid, you know, so low down the rank. It's like he feels that he's so well versed with this that suddenly he's in a situation where he's filled with emotions that take him outside of his comfort zone. I do get a sense of that.
Yeah, but also I think you're on something. Just the feeling, just for the sake of feeling something, and I think it's a bit like the Monty Python film, isn't it? The one where they're in the mud, you know, with the plague.
Holy Grail, yeah.
The Holy Grail, where that's when life was real, and because we live in such an atmosphere of affluenza, I think people are increasingly neutralized and neutered, and they don't feel anything. So I'm sorry to use a horrible example, but people cutting themselves and stuff, people want to feel something.
Yeah.
That's why people, or they go the opposite way and they nullify everything with drugs or drink. And I think that's also, I think Proust does it in quite a subtle way. I'm guessing it's why Baron de Charlus likes to be beaten within an inch of his life. So it's his, but seriously, it's his way of feeling something.
Yeah, but there's that great French tradition as well. You know, going back to the Marquis de Sade, I'm kind of working on some stuff on that at the moment. There's this great French tradition of utter pervy depravity. It's just,
well, I'm not sure it's uniquely French. I think what's uniquely French is they write thousands of pages about it.
Yeah.
Most other deviants within a certain nationality just go on and do it. The French have to, you know, reflect while smoking a giton.
Well, apparently the Marquis de Sade, very, very quick sidetrack, the Marquis de Sade, when he was in prison, it was either the Bastille or I think he was in prison somewhere before that, when he was writing his first draft for 120 days. He wrote it on a paper scroll and hid it in the wall so the guards couldn't find it. And I think when it burnt down, either he sent his sister or one of his lovers to try and find it. And he was inconsolable with this idea that, oh, my pervy writings, all my pervy thoughts have been burnt. And he was just, it was almost like part of him physically was imbued onto the paper.
Which again, in a bizarre way, goes back to my point about in the beginning was the word, and the way in which a lot of these writers given that they're writing about carnal issues, there is this never-ending perennial paradox that they're doing it with abstract words. Yes, the words are on a page, but words, the physicality of the word is very limited, especially with bloody Kindles and everyone reading off screens. But ultimately, they are our lifeline to coarse reality, whilst also simultaneously being the most ethereal thing there is, just a concept, a word.
Yeah, interesting.
Right, so I'm just going to keep identifying sentences. If you want to identify something yourself, please don't let me dominate it.
Yeah, it sounds like we've got the similar notes of stuff I picked out. So just keep shouting a bit out, and we'll see where we are.
Oh, the only other thing, and maybe we'll return to it at a future date, but I put in my notes, and it's not strictly relevant to this bit, but I began to think of, I remember reading, I think one of the first articles that, academic article, Samuel Beckett started off as an academic, ironically enough, and he wrote a paper about Proust, and I'm pretty sure one of the themes of the paper was the concept of habit, and how habit in Proust is a major theme. And that also struck me in the salon scene, that there's the conventionality of so you've got Dr. Cottard is just completely obsessed with words. He's you know, your McGilchrist example, he is completely left brain, Dr. Cottard, which again acts as a foil for the whole thing, because he basically, we'd say, he's far off on the spectrum. He doesn't get nuance, to the point that he's described as pulling these weird faces, thinking, because he's overthinking every social interaction, because he really struggles to understand basic nuance of conversation and stuff, which I think Proust describes for comic effect, but also there's a serious point there. But the notion of habit, this is what it almost forms a background. There's the conventional habit of the salon. They meet night after night after night. Madame Verdurin gets really jealous if anyone doesn't repeat the habit. But in amongst, and so that's the microcosm. Then at the bigger level is the society that Monsieur Swann inhabits. That's all about the habits and customs of the aristocracy and the haute bourgeoisie, whatever you want to call them. Yeah, this music. So if you think of the whole novel, that aspect of it as like the movement of the music, and then the intense feelings of emotion are like the sonata breaking through. And I think you could see the whole of the sprawling novel as one vast symphony, and this little sonata is that bit of music. And I remember, weirdly, I was really into classical music about 10, 20 years ago. And there's a Glinka, is it Piano Concerto number 5 or something? And all it is, and this is what reminded me of this, because all it is pure piano. There's no other instruments. And there's this particular little bit of this piano concerto that is hauntingly beautiful. And it's the closest I've got to directly experiencing what Proust is describing. And interestingly, because you're into Schopenhauer as well, I think Schopenhauer found music to be the most, the purest of the art forms, because it's almost pure abstraction. What you're listening to are these vibrations in the air, ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, I think to kind of bring in the latest, empirical science, especially with quantum theory, quantum field theory and stuff like that, it seems that we can perceive that what we see as the physical universe does operate on some sort of kind of vibration, resonance, wave principle. So for me, music, a really beautiful piece of music, that's the thing that gets the goosebump sensation, when you just get this sudden kind of tingling and a rush. And I have had that in art galleries before, and I have had that reading novels, but music is much more common. Just suddenly you will just hear a beautiful piece, and you can't really explain it with words. Things written with words, you can explain it with words. Visual pieces, art, sculpture, etc., you can explain it because it's something physical and present, but you can't read music. Musical notes, sheet music is a representation of the sounds, but like you say, the sound itself is very ethereal. It's something that's in your mind, but it's something that's also being transmitted. And I think you're onto something. there's a lot of theories recently about music and mathematics, like music follows mathematic themes. You know, is it the Fibonacci numbers that you can find it within musical arrangements, especially by you know, Mozart, Beethoven, you know, people who are, you know, cited as the best of all time.
Well, Douglas, sorry to interrupt, but before I forget, Douglas Hofstadter wrote a book, Bach, Gödel, and Escher.
Yeah, I used to have it. Yeah, I used to have that one.
Yeah, and I think underwriting it is this, Hofstadter's fascinated by patterns in reality, so he links maths and music directly.
Yeah, you see the patterns, yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, music and audio is one thing that these new AI models are really struggle to comprehend. Whereas words, you know, you put a big enough database of words or images into an AI large language model, and it can produce some kind of pretty, you know, convincing representations of intelligence. But music, it really struggles with. You listen to AI generated music, and straight away you're just like, whoa, what is that? This not quite right. So yeah, maybe something quite that's very hard to capture.
Then if we can get on a little bit, but just a few little minor observations. He talks about a debt, and one of the reasons he's not particularly, it's not about her physical features that attracts him. He describes how basically you can't fully see her physical features because of the ridiculous outfit she's wearing, which I'm assuming are like the corsets, you know, at the time. And I think I might have misremembered, but when his mother's going to bed, doesn't she mention something about the servant having to help her undress? Or she says, "You go to bed and I will get undressed," or something like that. But the point being that at the time this is being written, I've mentioned in earlier live streams, it's also the way in which technology is advancing. All of a sudden, Proust got to see the advent of the, you know, telegraph, telephone, cars repairing, the movies, all of these like really drastic. He lived through a period of rapid technological change, and he's right on the cusp. So women are still wearing what we would now consider to be almost torture devices. And I think it was in Proust's latter years that women stopped wearing corsets. So it really does bring home to you the change in times and the ridiculousness, if I can make up that word, the ridiculosity of the way in which our social mores evolve.
Yeah, it's kind of the antithesis nowadays. I mean, in Proust Day, it took a long time to get a lady dressed and undressed. You have to have a servant to help it on. Whereas nowadays, I mean, it's all automatic.
Put something on, woman.
Yeah, put something on. Yeah.
Well, I've been walking around the garden in my shorts, which is a very rare. Oh, no. The wildlife has been running for cover, so that's how hot it's been here.
If you look at your house on Google Maps, Google actually have to blur out the image of your house because what you do in the garden when it's a hot day, the satellite goes over and photographs your house on the wrong day.
No, not to sound arrogant or anything, but I used to play a lot of football in the past, and I do have footballer's legs. The rest of me has gone to pot.
Table football. Let's make a disclaimer. It doesn't count for
Sabutio.
Yeah, Sabutio.
No, I will.
The strongest flick in the West.
It might be self-denial, but I will defend my legs to the death. Here we go. Yeah, and then there's this phrase with that self-satisfied air that a society woman adopts when she insists that her one desire is to give herself up without fear of soiling her fingers to some unclean task, such as cooking the dinner with her own hands right in the dough. So it's in the context of a debt, suggesting, wouldn't it be fun if she could become a regular bookworm to bury my nose in a lot of old papers? And we know as the novel evolves, there's precious little chance of that. But it's the idea that someone operating outside of their wheelhouse, operating outside of their normal area. And again, it's a very mild version of the Baron Chalou who wants to go into a completely different social realm, and how going in and out between boundaries, the concept of transgression requires prior boundaries.
It does, yeah. Well, I think both do it as well. It's good that you point this out, because she's fantasizing what would it be like to be, you know, intelligent and cultured and be with an intelligent and cultured man, and he's kind of thinking, I guess, like the opposite in a way. What would it be like to be with this courtesan when, I could have anyone from high society?
Except, and I don't mean to be, break the habit of a lifetime. I'll be a bit evil-minded. I do get the sense that she's doing it, Odette's doing it in quite a manipulative way that would be in keeping with her background as a courtesan.
Yeah.
I think she's saying all this as part of the repartee to get Swann interested. I don't think for 1 second. Where at least the Baron Charlot, he's doing it as whatever the rights or wrongs of his BDSM fixation, it's part of his psyche for good or bad. He's not doing it for any other reason. He's not doing it for his own benefit. If anything, if it came out, it threatens to destroy his reputation.
Absolutely. No, that's a good point, because it is hinted. I mean, just to keep in tune with Proust's whole literary style, how much of this do we know is factual? I don't think we can take everything he's saying, Swann's thoughts, Swann's feelings, is always going to be subjective. So the narrative arc here with this romance, we question ourselves, and there's just little bits that I think Proust kind of drops in to make us question the motives of people. I think there's a bit where he talks about money, like Odette's asking for money. I think it's like 5,000 francs. And Swann is saying, he kind of knows that it's not right, but if he gives her things, then he feels that she's going to like him more. We don't know if this is actually true, whether this is what she's thinking, but then he's thinking, if I send her 7,000 francs, she's going to like me more. She's going to be so surprised. So there's this element that, maybe she's there asking for money. There's some monetary aspect to the relationship, which is very kind of, it kind of takes you out of the moment. You think, is this a romance? Is this a standard love story? But then this element of kind of financial transactions dropped in there, and then it's like, okay.
Yeah, but I think that's the Proustian method. So again, exactly. I think the Salon works so well because it's exaggerated, it's almost caricatured, it's Dickensian in some of the exaggerated characters.
Yeah.
But it's almost like a laboratory. It's a very circumscribed, false, exaggerated laboratory. So it's very obvious when you're reading that this is Proust, the author, is writing about this slightly caricatured, hermetically sealed salon. But he uses that almost as a double bluff to introduce some really profound psychological insights. And it's almost as if someone like Ian McGilchrist was writing a novel. But Ian McGilchrist couldn't do what Proust is doing.
No.
And that's no slight on Ian McGilchrist. Precious few people could do what Proust is doing. But I think that the clumsy point I may be trying to make is, I totally get your point about you don't know what the accuracy is. But I think Proust is very good at deliberately setting things up in an artistic way, a novelistic way. So, for example, we've morphed from Combray to a young boy's perspective. Now we're looking at it from an older man's perspective. So we have an omniscient narrator. There's no continuity between the consciousness that's describing events, except the fact that young Marcel knew Monsieur Swann. So it's artificial in its very structure, and Proust doesn't attempt to explain anything.
Yep.
He doesn't try and create, and this is, I think, again, clumsily what I'm trying to say is, it's psychological realism in a very unrealistic narrative form.
But I think that's what makes it realistic. It's the fact that claiming absolute objective truth in a narrative aspect, telling a straight tale, is disconnected from reality. That's not how we experience reality. So you're totally right, Paul. That I think the whole issue of the style is like it's presented as a factual love story, but actually when you look into the language and the approach and the whole structure of the novel as a whole, it's factual in the fact that it's not factual, if that makes any sense. It's factual as in it's not straight, it's not objective, it's subjective, and that makes it more factual than an objective, kind of a straight normal story.
Isn't the more prosaic way of saying that would be if someone's been involved in a traumatic incident, you would really suspect them if they gave you a chronologically completely accurate account.
Yeah.
The whole
It
point
would be
about
rehearsed.
yeah, well, the whole point about being traumatized is you'd make errors, you'd focus upon insignificant details because your mind's not working logically. Because guess what? You've been traumatized, and in a way, that's life. If you experience life, it's just an endless series of minor traumas.
Yeah, it really is. I miss the positivity.
I've got the face of Samuel Beckett behind me. I'm inhabited by his spirit. But seriously, that's why I like that type of literature.
Yeah,
that's what it does. It's honest in a way that. Oh, it's interesting. A slight tangent, but you know the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that we've talked about before. I think
many times. Yeah.
Yeah, they're changing it. I believe they're trying to change the title to the Diagnostic and Science Manual.
It's interesting.
Because they're so desperate for this scientific status of something that's patently, I'd argue Proust is more psychologically accurate than the DSM.
Yeah.
But anyway,
but just to draw on that very quickly, this is why I'm just very interested in characters like McGilchrist, because I think he is a practicing psychotherapist who understands the futility of the kind of the positive materialist scientific view of reality, or at least he understands that is one of many potential explanations that can be true, so that can be correct, all in parallel, why not necessarily be true. And if we focus our method of analysis or our observations on one small narrow window, it can cause pathology. And I think it's just fantastic just to read someone who puts a lot of very wordy, complex continental theory and psychoanalysis, Lacanian analysis, Freudian, he puts it so concisely that even someone like me could understand it. I just think it's very important that it's interesting we're at this stage now, especially with technology just completely gone rampant, that we live in such a scientific, overly technicized world, that there are still some breakthrough voices that are actually coming out and saying like, hey, no, this isn't how things work.
Yeah, but then bringing you back down to earth, Stuart, the horse has bolted. It's on the final stretch. Ian McGilchrist is hanging onto the tail of the horse as he bumps on the rocks just before his head finally gets bashed in. Yeah. So that's the actual point we're at. So I really applaud your optimism that you're taking from that. I don't share it.
No, well, I don't. I love Japanese cinema. I love samurai cinema. You're gonna die, so you might as well make a point or take 100 people out with you. And I do think that's what he's doing. The noble harakiri kind of thing, the harakiri of philosophy.
We're going to overshare again. I've been known to go around the house basically speaking like a samurai for most of the day.
They in samurai films, the jidaigeki ones, the historical ones, the Japanese that they speak is basically the equivalent of it in a Shakespeare play, speaking Old English. Like nobody in Japan speaks like that in real life. Like, but apparently historically there's a precedent that's what the upper class in ancient Japan used to speak like. So it's quite interesting. I only found that out recently.
I'm now strangely aroused. Quickly moving on, which is becoming our stock phrase, isn't it? Yeah. But there's Dr. Cotard and the caricature. He was never quite certain of the tone in which he ought to reply to anyone, or whether the speaker was jesting or in earnest, and so in any event he would embellish all his facial expressions with the offer of a provisional smile whose expectant subtlety would exonerate him from the charge of being a simpleton. I think people don't realize I just find that funny, because it's basically, he is this, in McGilchrist's terms, this left brain spectrum person who's got this, and it's shortly afterwards, doesn't he? He basically winks at Swann, and Swann thinks, have I seen him in a brothel? Why is he winking lewdly at me?
Yeah, he does say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I was going to say,
no, go ahead.
It's the weird eccentricity amidst, and this is again the Proust Dickens would describe all these caricatures in a, you know, typically Dickensian way. That's hence the name. But he wouldn't, and there is some psychological acuity in Dickens, but not at this level.
Not at all. No, what I was going to say is that each and every character in this little microcosm is, with a few exceptions, every single character is very acutely aware of what other people think of them and moderate their behavior based on, I'm trying to think of that expression. It's how they feel, not just that they are perceived within the group, but how they want to perceive or want to be perceived. So they moderate their responses. There's
Isn't it Irving Goffman, the whole the theatre of public life, that we're all playing roles? Yeah, Irving Goffman had this whole but everyday life, or actually it's everyday life is more like a Shakespearean theatre than you'd ever think.
Absolutely, and that's why this kind of literature and theatre is so bang on and fantastic. But Madame Verdurin, I feel like she's one of the characters that, to put it crudely, doesn't really give a damn what other people think of it. It's more a case, she's more bothered about what she thinks of herself, about her position, her little group. So she's, I think last week we said she's like the mother hen, or 3 weeks ago, she's the mother hen figure. She wants to feel fully in control of the group. So to her, it's not what people think within the group think of her that's so much of an issue. It's the fact that there are alternative groups that might be positioned above her little group in her own mind. And this is why Swann to her is such a, I guess, such a, I don't know, like a difficult character for her to contemplate, because she would love to capture him into her group exclusively. But the fact that he knows groups of people, aristocrats, you know, royalty, etc., that in her mind she has positioned herself as inferior to, he represents a danger. And it's interesting because he does his very best. He's such a slick social customer. He's fully aware of how this all works, and he does his very best. I think there's one point she goads him into talking about, I can't remember the name, but it's another group of aristocrats that he visits, and she goads him into saying, "Oh, you know, tell us what you really think. Tell us what you really think of these people." And he keeps his mouth shut. He doesn't want to mix the two groups. But she's so offended by the fact that this other group exists, and she doesn't have access to it.
Well, yeah, and she's almost, I keep using the word foil, but I think this is what Proust does. If you think back to Marcel's grandmother, isn't she the one who, when she finds out that Swann has these posh connections, she's actually thinks less of him? And she has the inverse attitude, social attitudes of snobbery. She's like an anti-snob.
Yeah.
And Madame Verdurin is the epitome of snobbishness.
Yeah.
So they're complete different ends of the spectrum. And I think we've been prepared for, I've said it before, but the whole Combray section prepares us for genuine, sincere, rural domesticity. And then you go into this urban, backbiting catfest. And the jump is quite bracing.
Yeah, very bracing.
Yeah, and then again, talking about foils, there's I think they're talking about Cotard, and it's the beginning where it says, paragraph beginning, the critical faculty. So he says, the critical faculty on the universal application of which he prided himself was completely lacking in him, the refinement of good breeding that it consists in assuring someone whom you are obliging in any way, without expecting to be believed, that it is really yourself that is obliged to him, was wasted on Cotard, who took everything he heard in its literal sense. That's my point about he's definitely a left-brainer. You've really got into him, McGilchrist, haven't you?
Yeah, no, I think it's brilliant. I've spent most of the week they're reading something of things that big double book he got. Well, it's only a PDF.
The Matter of Things.
The Matter of Things there, because that's the one he's going into Heidegger more. But there's loads of recent podcasts and stuff he's done, and lectures and things like that. Just had those.
If you treat yourself at Christmas, whatever, the double volume, The Matter with Things, it's beautifully produced, and if nothing else, it's got in the second volume the bibliography alone It's like an encyclopedia of references.
Yeah.
It's really in this day and age. Sorry to go off on a little tear, but the number of times I've had to get you to find me PDFs because the physical copy of the books I've got a terrible print, modern print. It's so blurry, it just messes up my eyes. Well, and that's how bad, I hate on-screen reading, but sometimes modern books and modern printing makes me dive for the screen. So
yeah, it's the paper quality. I think now don't they have to put a certain amount of recycled material into the paper when it prints it? Sometimes you get this very blurry, smudgy kind of text.
Yeah, but there's something wrong with my, like I say, there must be something wrong with my eyes because there only has to be a slight blur and I just get a massive headache. So I'm a big drama queen when it comes to print quality. We could do that as well. We could have once a month. I could just rant about. I could read from books that give me a headache, get a headache, and then rant even more.
And get angry. Yeah.
Gypsy Rose wants to ask a question. Yes, you may. How long do you think it'll take her to type it?
I think we've got a lot of input, so it shouldn't take too long.
Right. Well, I will find the next. Have you found anything you want to witcher about?
Yeah, I'm just trying to pick up and scrolling down. Just thinking where we got to. Yeah, I think my notes are a little bit ahead. Just what we covered last week.
Well, we've got on to, it mentions the ease, the social ease he has. So we covered that. The Dr. Cotard smiling at him with the old come on. We've got to that. And again, I'm sponsored by the Foil Corporation. I should start an aluminium foil, or as the Americans would say, aluminum. There's the old friend of the Verdurins called Sanyet, whose shyness, simplicity, and good nature deprived him of all the consideration due to his skill as an archivist, his large fortune, and the distinguished family to which he belonged. When he spoke, his words came out with a prattle that was delightful to hear because one felt that it indicated not so much a defect in his speech as a quality of his soul, like a survival from the innocence of childhood which he had never lost. So amidst all this backbiting is a very innocent person.
Yeah.
And that, again, it doesn't seem like a particularly important point, but it raises the issue of to what extent... I've always been fascinated by people who are just preternaturally calm and stolid and don't get wound up, where I've got this borderline psychotic Irish character that is one sentence away from losing my rag. And that's on a good day.
Yeah, very good day.
but then how judgmental should you be of me? Who are you to judge me? No, but I mean, if that's your base emotion, that's your base level, and somebody else is just preternaturally calm, what I think what I'm getting at is, where does moral responsibility come in? So you could live a really good life, but that's just because that's the way you are. And I think people project onto that type of person. Oh, aren't they lovely? Well, maybe that's just the way they are.
Yeah, I think it comes in as, my kind of maxim for life is as long as you're not physically assaulting me or trying to kill me, then you can be whoever you want. If that makes any sense, try not to get offended by people's little tics.
No, yeah, but I'm making a slightly separate point. I'm making a point about the very notion of goodness. There's a voluntary aspect. If you do evil, yeah, you're right. But the point is, there's also the likelihood you'll do evil, or you'll do something not evil but nasty. So I have to, for example, we're having this conversation, I've had to filter out about 10 insults. in the last 10
people
seconds.
Want to hear.
Someone's in the comments will probably say, you haven't done a very good filtering job so far. But you know my point, where some people some people wouldn't have those thoughts. But I'm the bad person. This is where I am. You need to now psychoanalyze me, Dr. Stewart.
I need to psychoanalyze you. I don't know, Paul. I think it's just like, I don't know. Maybe it's a northern thing. It's like, I know so many people like you. It's just like it's the abrasiveness. Like I know.
So Stuart, what I'm hearing, Dr. Stewart, is it's not that you're bad, Paul. You are, but there's quite a few of you.
Yeah, but your badness is normalized through cultural explanations. I don't know. I don't think it's badness. I don't think.
No. But I'm not explaining.
I know what you mean, yeah.
I'm not explaining it very well. It's basically about the essentiality of character, because this is what this quote reminded me of.
This is what it's about, yeah.
To what extent? So cliches like character is destiny, which is a cliche, but what Proust is describing is something close to that. So you can make all the effort in the world, and I guess I'm not an expert in addiction, but I'm guessing it's what makes, and it goes to, I've always been fascinated by the level of responsibility people have with issues like addiction. To what extent can you say it's a disease, you can't control it? To what extent can you absolve yourself, and to what extent you have to take responsibility, and to what extent, given that some people, I think it's quite demonstrably found that some people are much more liable to addictive behavior than others. So it seems to be, it's life, if it's a level playing field, there's lots of weird slopes in weird areas. It's not a level playing field. Our character is not.
That's the thing, yeah. No, it's not. And it's very interesting, because I think in Proust's time, society is going to be a lot more expectant of certain behaviors, whereas in this little microcosm, this little salon, I think people's behaviors, though, at least they feel comfortable enough with each other that they're allowed to kind of be themselves in a way. But I think for me, the whole concept of yourself, authenticity, you have an authentic self, I am this, I am that, is partly you reflecting off your thoughts of what society expects from you, like your internalized societal values, but also your own internal dialogue as well. And I think, certain people don't keep things inside, and then you could see that as healthy, if that makes any sense, because you're not bottling anything up. You have a thought, this is how I feel, I'm going to express it. At the same time, there's people who keep things internally, maybe like this Sanyet person, because he believes that this is how I should be reserved.
I'd push back on that. I think he's genuinely an ingenue. What do you call it? An ingenue. He's an innocent.
Okay.
And this is the point I'm making. You're right. There might be a third category of people who are able to, unlike me, they hold it in, they filter, and they come across as decent, upstanding, non-psychotic individuals, unlike me. But there's this category of people who never have the thought in the first place. Yeah. And I think this is all relevant, because Proust as a writer is obviously, he's found, I think this is what the novel's all about. Towards the very end, plot spoiler. I said spoil plotter.
You said plot spoiler, I think.
But towards the end, he finds he has this epiphanic realization that he is a writer, and that's all of these thoughts he needs to get down on paper. The Sanyets of these world could not be the writer that Proust is, because they're happier, more well-adjusted, stable, stolid people.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the aspects of the novel. It's one of the aspects of James Joyce who I'm increasingly interested in. These are quite disturbed, not particularly well-adjusted people, but that, creativity and madness have always been linked.
It's the tension that creates the artwork. Without tension, without conflict, without friction, you don't get the work of art. I think that's what he's saying here.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. There's a little bit later on. I don't think I've written the note down, but it's insinuated that Swann associates with Sanyet. I think there's a throwaway sentence, nothing's throwaway in Proust, but there's a sentence that says that he I don't know, he relates to him. Swann feels closest to him or something like that. So it's just maybe Swann himself is one of these people who's a happy-go-lucky, easygoing. And maybe that's why the novelty of this jealous romance with Odette is so powerful and enticing to him.
Yeah, because he gets to act out of character.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it draws him out of his comfort zone.
So maybe I should try, just like cosplay, I should try being a nice, well-adjusted person.
You should just throw on a Father Christmas costume and start distributing toys around the village in the middle of July and just see what happens.
And they'd say, why is that Rolf Harris lookalike got that large sack of presents? Keep away.
I'm gonna say might get locked up.
Yeah, there's just more the Dickensian caricature of the, where are we? There's the old aunt who wears black. As she was entirely uneducated and was afraid of making mistakes in French, she used purposely to speak in an indistinct and garbling manner, thinking that if she should make a slip, it would be so buried in the surrounding confusion that no one could be certain whether she'd actually made it, so that her talk was a sort of blurred expectoration, out of which would emerge from time to time the rare words of which she felt positive.
Yeah, it's my contribution to this podcast.
No, this triggered me because I was a postgrad student in Edinburgh, and I taught, my first degree was economics and politics, so I taught economics. Yep. It was brilliant, actually, complete sidebar. But because I could teach economics and politics as a tutor, I had more disposable cash then than I do now, because all you have is student digs, and you went out and drank beer. That was the only expense.
It was a lot cheaper then as well, yeah.
Yeah, and the pay at the time was really good. So I taught in 2 different departments, but I taught economics, and I was doing a long I was good at economics, but not brilliant. And it was never interested me that much. So I'm trying to explain this long, complicated piece of economics in an equation. And halfway through, I'm looking at the blackboard. I'm writing in chalk, and there's about 30 students in a tutorial. Yeah. And I lost my train of thought. So I remember distinctly, I wrote really close to the board. I was thinking, oh, God, what do we do now? And I wrote QED. And mumbled something into the blackboard, and then turned round and said, so is that all clear, in a really aggressive Scouse fashion? And there's like 30 students looking back at me completely bewildered, but no one said, no, could you explain that again? Yeah. So then I rubbed it all out as quick as I could and carried on with the next thing. Yeah. So I relate to this old auntie in a black dress. I've used that technique.
It's kind of like a Judge Holden moment, isn't it? You know, it just erase the evidence. The truth remains. That is true, isn't it, children?
Yeah, because we lose our train of thought doing stuff like this, but it's not a disaster. But if you're trying to explain a maths problem, yeah, and you completely lose your train of thought, it's like, oops.
Well, I always have moments when I think like, oh God, am I getting like early onset Alzheimer's? Because I'll start thinking about some very deep philosophical stuff and start talking. But then all I need to do to make myself feel better is watch a Zizek video and just think like, well, if he's become like, the #1 philosopher in the world, that's exactly what he does. He starts talking and he's like, it just loses his train of thought. And it's quite difficult to talk about some of this stuff without kind of forgetting what you started off on. What did I start on?
But again, it's can I use the word foil yet again? Because this is almost like this old aunt in the black dress is the antithesis of Proust, because he's managing to put into words such complex ideas. Yeah, and this is that would be kryptonite. This old lady in a black dress. Yeah. So it's the breadth and depth of what Proust writes about. He writes from every single perspective, including those opposite to his own.
I think it's fantastic the way that he can be the character. It's like he just had this amazing observational ability, not just to look at how people are acting and how they look, but it's like how he obviously could deduce from how they acted and looked what they were thinking, what they were feeling, what their motives were. And within 2 or 3 sentences, we get such a rich picture of a character heavily focused on their emotions, their feelings, how they act, as opposed to, he was a man in a hat wearing a jacket. He looked very angry. We just get this such psychological insight, and he does it. It's such compact, like, every single word means something.
Which is an odd phrase, isn't it? If you thought, what is Proustian synonymous with? Compact wouldn't be the first word, given that it's the longest novel in English. Yeah, exactly. Except you're completely correct as well. Yeah, and it's that tension. It's the tension between the compactness, the brevity, the succinctness of the writing versus the sprawling tomes. Yeah, and it's very rare you get that in a writer.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would just again, again, apologies, but this notion of the foil, because just before you get into the very serious discussion of the epiphanic moment of the sonata, he's describing yet another caricature of Madame Verdurin. So, vanquished by her device of a feigned but continuous hilarity, she would utter a little cry, shut tight her little bird-like eyes, which were beginning to be clouded over by a cataract, which I found interesting. That in the middle of this funny, and again, it's almost like wheels within wheels, in the middle of a funny description, he shows that this impending doom is going to be upon her vision.
Yeah.
So there's the incipient cataract, which in those days, I'm guessing you couldn't really just operate away.
Yeah, you're not going to fix it.
You're not going to get eye drops for that, love. And quickly, as though she'd only just time to avoid some indecent sight or to parry a mortal blow, burying her face in her hands, which completely covered it and prevented her from seeing anything at all, she would appear to be struggling to suppress, to annihilate a laugh, which, were she to give way to it, would have caused her to lose consciousness. So stupefied with the gaiety of the faithful, drunk with good fellowship, slander, and acquiescence, Madame Verdurin, perched on a high seat like a bird whose biscuit had been dipped in mulled wine, would sob with amiability. Now, in that bit I've just read, it's just microcosm within microcosm, encapsulation within encapsulation, because there's quite a loosely baggy description of the feigned hilarity. Then you get a one sentence, so stupefied with the gaiety. That sentence, so stupefied with the gaiety of the faithful, drunk with good fellowship, slander, and acquiescence. That in one compact sentence, to use your word, is an absolute summary of tens of pages of behaviour in the salon.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be so effective if you hadn't have had the tens of pages of activity in the salon compressed into that one sentence. And that's what he does all the time. It's long, rambling passages, and then it's like he prepares you for then this raging uppercut of this really compact, succinct sentence.
But he brings back important kind of leitmotifs from earlier in the novel. You know, a biscuit steeped in mulled wine. It goes back to the Madeleine and the tea. You're dipping that. For Proust, that was his moment of epiphany. Whereas here, just the fact she's dipping a biscuit in a mulled wine in the same paragraph as talking about cataracts, which blur the vision. It's this idea that we're not seeing a moment of transcendental kind of clarity or being raised to, which we're doing with the sonata lately. He's basically saying we're in the swamp here, we're in society, we're in this noisy, loud kind of convergence of people where nothing is it seems. You know, people are playing parts, people are acting. The blurred vision is part of it. You know, the mulled wine, the drunk vision is the opposite or the antithesis of the clarity of the Madeleine section.
Yeah, and then I talked about wheels within wheels. Adet mentions Vermeer, and later on, Vermeer is the subject of a really poignant scene where Begot collapses. He keeps repeating to himself, a little patch of yellow wall, a little patch of yellow wall, and he gets off his deathbed to go and see, or sick bed that turns into his deathbed in the gallery, just to see this little painting of Delft by Vermeer. And this is what I'm going to say now is I'm not claiming that Proust meant it, although I just don't know. But just before the bit I just quoted, he's talking about Madame Verdurin and how she gets all these presents off people and how she's tried to persuade them not to. And it says the house was gradually filled with a collection of foot warmers, cushions, clocks, screens, barometers, vases, blah, blah, blah. But foot warmers, there's a famous milkmaid painting by Vermeer, and there's a foot warmer on the floor. That it's not obvious it's a foot warmer. It's like a little, because they contain them in boxes, like ornate little boxes.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, to the extent to which Vermeer plays a big role in the way Proust writes, whether that's either a subconscious image he'd had in his head to mention foot warmers. It could be a completely random inclusion. It's a subliminal memory, or it's a deliberate little flavour of Vermeer, given that Vermeer's been mentioned 3 or 4 pages earlier. And Vermeer is then in his mind later on in the Begot scene.
I would say the latter. I mean, this is Proust. Like we said many times, nothing he does is by chance. I think everything is so intentional.
But then again, it's what we might get on to talk about, my newfound fixation on Joyce. It doesn't really matter if the author intended it. Joyce, for example, writes in a deliberately allusive manner in which he cackled one time when he finished Ulysses. I think he said that'll keep the scholars busy for centuries because of all the references. And the point being that even if a novel evokes a certain thing, just because the author, it's the authorial fallacy it's called, isn't it? Just because the author didn't intend it doesn't mean it's not a quality of the work of art.
Absolutely.
So the fact I can see the foot warmer and I can show you the painting in which the foot warmer appears, that to me is enough to say, well, that's a resonance that this work of art produces, irrespective of the author's intentions.
Yeah. I love this bit here. Meanwhile, Monsieur Verdurin, after first asking Swann's permission to light his pipe, and in parentheses, no ceremony here, you understand. We're all pals. But there is a type of ceremony going on, and I think it's a bit of a kind of an in-joke here, perhaps, to say that even when we think we're in a kind of an organic social gathering, there still is element of ceremony. There still is an element of process that's under the hood, so to speak.
And then there's a bit where she gets him. It's hilarious. I find this funny because it's got nuances. It's again the carnal. It's my point about the incarnation of art and the physical. But Monsieur Swann, you mustn't run away. This is Madame Verdurin. Monsieur Swann, you mustn't run away without feeling the little bronze mouldings on the backs of these chairs. Isn't it the pattern are soft? No, not like that. With your whole hands, feel them properly. And then someone says, if Madame Verdurin starts fondling her bronzes, said the painter, we won't get any music tonight.
Wink, wink.
Yeah. And then she switches in a few lines later. Come along, you can caress them later, after she's just berated him to give them a good grope.
Yeah.
Now it is you who are going to be caressed in the ear. You'll like that. There are so many registers of innuendo. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Should we go on to the sonata? I think we're getting there, aren't we? Let's get that done so we can move on to the romance next session. The year before. So yeah, you might be able to explain it. He rehears the music, doesn't he? It's like basically saying the previous year he heard this little kind of snippet of a sonata, and it didn't really do much to him. And he's basically saying that Swann wasn't really a man of music, so to speak, or he didn't really understand it. But then in this specific moment, in this specific arrangement in the salon, it suddenly takes on not just significance, but something more akin to the Madeleine and the tea scene for young Marcel.
Yeah, and this is the section that is all about the incarnation of the abstract into the physical and vice versa. So it's what you've just said. The year before at a soiree, you'd heard a musical work played on the piano and violin. And it's the liquid lapping of waves, the mass. He talks about the mauve tumult of waves. And then there's this passant, une passante in French is a woman passing by. It's a moment passing by, and the comparison is with a woman in the street that you might never see again, but makes an impression on you. So it's their, but at a given moment, without being able to distinguish any clear outline or to give a name to what was pleasing him, suddenly enraptured, he had tried to catch and retain the phrase or harmony, he knew not which, that had just passed through the air. I think this is Schopenhauer's point, this idea of the intangibility of music, but simultaneously it's the purest form of art. And had opened and expanded his soul, just as the fragrance of certain roses wafting on the moist of evening has the power of dilating our nostrils. So we're back to Combray, aren't we?
Yeah, linking into the hawthorns and the nature. I think the use of the word dilating is quite interesting, because it's that initial reception is kind of passive, but then once you're locked onto the music, it's like a dilation. It's like, you need this more. You kind of focus on it, and you don't do that. Your ears. I think some animals. I mean, you're a dog person, so dogs can swivel their ears. Certain ruminants, horses, and things like that, they can twist their ears consciously to track sounds. Whereas I think humans, we kind of lost that ability. We probably had it, millions of years ago. But with your nose, you do see a visual cue, and someone smells, and you kind of, your brain picks up on a fragrance. It's like you do get this kind of visual flair, so to speak. And it's just like he's locked onto it. Something's caught his attention, but it's not intentional. He didn't choose for that to happen. The music, the piece, the sonata kind of came to him. And it's so analogous to what happens with Odette. He didn't see Odette and say, hey, yeah, she's my woman, I'm a dream. She's my Sydney Sweeney. I'm going to take her home tonight. It's slowly, he kind of, I guess, like his attention dilates to say, oh, hang on, yeah, something's going on here. And I think that is the analogy. That is the metaphor that really links it to the sonata.
But also, it's interesting, you just made me think, sonata isn't a million miles away from the name Sanyet. And this is the point I was making about Sanyet is a non-dilated person. Sanyet doesn't have the extremes of emotion that Proust, the actual writer, and his personification in either Marcel or Swann.
Yeah.
He doesn't have those dilations, which allows him to lead a very innocent, happy life, but not achieve the extremes of felt emotion.
Yeah.
And the whole book begins with this excessively neurasthenic, ridiculously, oh, mummy, I need my kiss or I'm going to die. That's the emotional excess at the very beginning. And Swann was presented as this, too cool for school type guy. And he falls into this similar trap.
Yeah.
Through, like I say, the sonata that isn't a million miles from the word sonnet, which interests me. Sanyet, sorry.
Yeah, it's a good catch. I didn't pick that one up.
Well, I only did as I was speaking, so. But it also goes back to my point about you're just saying basically that, correct me if I'm wrong, Swann has this involuntary reaction. Sanyet is involuntarily nice.
Yeah.
And this is the point I was very clumsily trying to make earlier on, was to what extent are we, it's the thing I think we've talked about before, this myth that we have a very unique, controllable sense of self is the fiction that we all go by through life. But when you actually reflect upon it in detail, like Proust does, he throws into sharp relief all the times in which we're actually not in control. We're riding the wave of our emotions, our involuntary responses. Hence, I think, all the references to water and waves. And again, the sonata is this encapsulation, this microcosmic metonym, I think you'd probably call it, of the rolling waves. And then in life, we're carried along, but then we can pick out the little sonata of meaning.
Yeah.
Oh, that is... But again, from what you've said, yeah, you can consciously perceive the little motif of the sonata, but you're not fully in control of hearing it or even appreciating it. There is an involuntary aspect to all of this. And hence, it's not a surprise, is it, that the involuntary memory is one of the key unifying motifs of the book as well.
Yeah.
Later on there's the Madeleine initially, but later on the Madeleine reappears as a involuntary memory, along with the noise of metal on a railway track, the pipes in the hotel or the apartment. They then act like the sonata. They take on the role of the sonata. But that's the major theme of the whole novel. We don't control involuntary memories. Just like I don't think we control most of our lives, despite the fiction that we do.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's a depressing or an uplifting thought or neutral. I don't know.
I think it's only depressing when you view it from the kind of the framework or the reality tunnel that I am a physical, kind of differentiated, unique being, material being operating on mechanical principles that exists in a mechanical world. Once you start questioning the reality of that framework of reality, then you start to think that, well, we're on kind of shady grounds here. And that's interesting there, the paper we were talking about earlier, this kind of link between the schizophrenic experience and modernist literature. That paper also talks about Aldous Huxley's Laws of Perception and Aldous Huxley's experimentation with mescaline, which is a very potent hallucinogen or psych. Nowadays they call in research, they call it psychedelic, because a hallucinogen suggests that you are seeing visual images, whereas the psychedelic is more akin to the actual experience, because it's not necessarily just images you see. It completely changes your perception of what reality is. So it's not just that you see things, it's that you think things differently, you hear things differently, you smell things differently, your sense of self. I mean, at high doses of psychedelics, your ego completely dissolves and you no longer become a fixed physical enclosed entity. You hear people who've been through these experiences talking about the experience of being one with the universe, or being one with nothing, or becoming nothingness itself. I mean, this is a replicated phenomenon that that medicine is just now really taking seriously. And I think that comes down to it. Just going back to your earlier point, it's like once you see the fallacy, or maybe fallacy is too strong a word, but once you see the illusion of self and the illusion of you in control of yourself, in fact, the illusion of you actually being a self in itself, once that breaks down, I think that's obviously going to be a terrifying thing, unless you're ready for it, and unless you've kind of prepared for that possibility.
But then you've got the eternal paradox of art, because Proust has written such a uniquely individual book about the way in which the unique individual is a bit of a myth.
Yeah.
And that is what art always achieves. It represents the unrepresentable, which it's the paradoxical element. Again, it's back to Ian McGilchrist. The right side of the brain deals with paradox, ambiguity, metaphors, analogies. The left-hand side needs logic and clear causality.
Yeah.
And what art does is allow you to be comfortable with the paradox. And I would argue, as we've been discussing it, life itself is much more a paradox than a solvable problem.
Yeah.
So it's always been a theme of me on this channel, is the idea that if you want to wonder why so many people suffer from mental illness in the contemporary affluenza-ridden society, guess what? You don't have the mental training. I think reading Proust, as abstract and arty-farty as it sounds, actually prepares you for the paradoxical nature of life more than any practical. I think in US high schools, and to a lesser extent in the UK, you have civics classes. You get taught about the principles about being a citizen and stuff. And I just think those are the type of superficially practical, useful things that actually are completely useless. And art is the exact opposite. Good art appears to be completely useless. I think Adorno calls it purposiveness without purpose. So art is useless, but its very uselessness is why it ultimately becomes useful.
Yeah, I think what I always gathered by that quote from Adorno was it's useless from a specific vantage point, if that makes any sense. And I think Adorno's deliberately doing that to say that we are so stuck in this enlightenment, positivist, means to ends type thinking, that within that framework of thinking that is so common at Adorno's time, and now it's gone to the perverse nth degree. We are always looking for utility. We are always looking for optimization. So from that default perspective of Western society, or now I would argue probably most of global society, is gonna always be looked at with a utilitarian value. Is this useful from XY perspective? But what's interesting about art is its lack of utility, or its inability to be to become a standing reserve in Heidegger's terms. It can just stand in itself. It's that uselessness that gives it the utility to see what it is, to see what reality is.
Yeah, I think rephrasing that in a slightly different way, it's you've got a world of affluenza, so materially we've never been so well off.
Yep.
You've got a world in which never have we had so many people who are mentally not happy, or whatever euphemism you want to say, suffering from mental conditions. And the very thing that is supposed to causally solve those mental problems, drugs, medication, medicalization of mental issues, none of that seems to be making things better. If anything, it makes things worse. Diagnosing and increasing diagnoses to the nth degree only increases the field of unhappy people, it seems to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm rephrasing what you've basically said. In terms of actually finding some type of, if not solution, an amelioratory factor, you couldn't find anything better than art. So art provides the solution to a question that was never asked by the system that doesn't recognize art.
Exactly.
And if you wanted empirical proof, because within scientific realms, the biggest single sociological survey of citizens' attitudes, I think is it called the British Sociological Survey? But it's the world's biggest. That's what I didn't realize. It's the world's biggest survey of social attitudes. And they've done it for about 50 years. It's a longitudinal study of a huge number of people. And what they found is the single biggest predictor of longevity is engagement with the arts and reading.
Yeah.
So you just come full circle, don't you?
It's the biggest bit of advice. Any takeaways from today's podcast is, if you want to live longer, read Proust.
Maybe not on this channel. No, what the beauty of this channel is, it's like I've said before, I've known that character from Catch 22 who wants to make his life seem longer by just making it more boring. So you could watch this podcast and your life will qualitatively seem immensely longer. And that is the secret to a perceived long life.
Absolutely.
So on that note, I think we'll call it live longer, or think you're living longer.
Can you do the live long and prosper? But Darren will appreciate this. There we go. Live long and prosper.
Can I just finish on to bring humor into mortality and death, as I like to do? Do you know that really odd guy who the billionaire who wanted to live forever, who had blood transplants off his son and stuff?
Well, which one? There's a few.
Well, there's one particular one who basically he's invested millions in longevity, scientific studies and stuff. Turns out he's got an incurable, it's not an immediate killer, but he's got some long-term degenerative incurable stomach problem.
Oh, God.
And I'm just thinking, daft bugger, it's probably all the blood infusions you've had that you shouldn't have had.
It's probably all the pills from Holland and Barrett that he's crushed up and combined, and nobody knows what the hell the long-term effects
I think he's at a slightly higher level than Holland and Barrett, Stuart. No offence to H&B.
Yeah, but I think it's the purest stuff direct from the lab.
But I'm on fish oil tablets, so as I've always said, I'm going to live to 140.
Yeah,
and I will almost die laughing, a bit like Madame Verdurin. I'll dislocate my jaw if I find out that Guinness actually does have curative properties.
Yeah, it's out. You know the secret. My wife's grandmother is, I think she's 105 years old this year.
Phew.
And yeah, the secret, she said, is obviously olive oil, being Spanish. You eat a fresh orange every day. And she's never touched alcohol, or she's never smoked. Right. So, well, I know we're buggered full.
I dispute your abuela. I reject her and all her works.
Yeah.
And on that dipsomaniac note, all the very best. See you in a couple of weeks' time. Bye-bye.
Yeah, see you in a bit.